Hello, this is Dr. Flight, and this is a lecture that is focusing on identifying attractive target markets. So this process would begin after we have segmented a generic market and we are left with a a collection of market subcategories or subgroups of consumers, and now we want to know which of these market segments we want to try to reach, ones that are profitable, ones that make sense for our firm. So when we talk about targeting, what we're doing is we're trying to, again, identify different groups of people or organizations towards which we should direct our resources as a firm. And this is particularly important because we cannot generally speaking, this is a generalization, we cannot generally afford to try to reach everybody in a generic market. But rather, because we have limited resources, we are more effective trying to find the customers that are most likely to buy our product and position our product to them first. So we want to try to, again, identify customers who are most likely to buy our product and make sure that we're reaching them first with the resources that we have to be able to reach them. So this is important. Generally speaking, again, we want to be able to find those market segments that fit us and what we do from a firm's perspective well, and we want to find those that are going to be profitable. So those are the two general key drivers of which market segments will be the most attractive to us, the ones that we can reach, the ones that we fit well culturally with, and the ones that are the most profitable. If we try to force our product and our product's brand and such on a group of consumers that are not familiar with us, or they're not aligned with our resources, like we can't necessarily provide them the best product because we don't have the resources to make the best product for them, it's just not going to work. There are other customers out there who are probably better suited for us, and we should try to serve them first before we try to serve customers that just generally are not receptive to us. So there's a process then you can walk through that will help us through the segmentation activity here. It begins with identifying the needs of customers and how those needs can best be met. Identifying the different groups of segments. So a lot of times we'll use identification criteria such as demographics and psychographics and so forth to do that. We will identify and measure the attractiveness and profitability of the market segments. We will focus on how we can position our product to that segment. We will test the positioning statement and positioning concept, and then we will, in the very last step, it's an action step where we launch our product and we commit to a marketing strategy or plan that includes delivery and pricing and advertising and packaging and so forth. So basically what we walk through is a series of steps that help us focus on those customers, again, that are going to be most likely to buy our products and be profitable to us and be loyal. So when we start at the beginning here, we look at something called core needs. And one of the ways that is very effective to think about market segments is not necessarily to think about their demographics and their psychographics and all of that, but think about what customers need and how different needs often drive our purchase decisions. So here we have three different groups of consumers, and they have certain needs for investment, financial investment products. And so we have one group of consumers who want to grow their investments without taxes. So like a Roth IRA or something like that. We have another group of consumers who want to gain some appreciation that has a very, very low risk. And then we have some other type of consumer who has an income platform, aged over 55, so they're probably going to want to use the money relatively soon, as opposed to the single parent category here or the career woman category here. And we talk about the different income levels. Like what percentage of these market segments are over 50,000, whether they're working, whether they're professional, married. So these are all demographic characteristics. Then we have lifestyle characteristics, and then we have behavioral types of characteristics. So these are the different characteristics. But the core need is really what we're focused on here. And if we can identify the core need, then that helps us drive what we're looking for as far as building the profile, which can come later on. Another example is a toothpaste example, and we actually have segment names. So we have, well, these would be like profile names. We have the warrior, the sociable, the sensory, and the independent, and we have different needs that each of these toothpaste consumers are looking for. So we have preventative decay, but a value brand consumer. We have, again, preventative decay here for sensory, but they're also worried about taste and flavor. We have whitening. Again, preventative decay is their primary need. And then we have oral hygiene for the warrior. So they all have this underlying need of preventative decay. I mean, everybody wants to have healthy, safe, medically safe teeth, but then there are additional needs that separate people. Some people want strictly white teeth. Others want hygienically clean teeth over that. Some people really have a thing. They want to make sure their toothpaste tastes well. So the oral hygiene person may be willing to sacrifice taste, for instance, if it does a better job medically cleaning their teeth. The person who wants value may be willing to give up some of the teeth whitening properties if they can save some money, for instance. So there are drivers here that are needs-based, and then if we use that as kind of the core notion of how we'll define these different market segments, then we can go out and we can do market research, and we can identify different characteristics that they have based on demographics and all the other different criteria than we would typically use. Okay, so there's another example then of how a need focus can lead to the actual segment identity thing. So we talk about the customer's problem. This is a siding, like if a person has a home and they want to place siding on their home, they want to improve their home, and they're choosing which kind of siding to have. You have some people who are driven by price within the product and the product category. So they have a need, but they need to do this inexpensively. And then they have another segment here they've identified who are less likely to be motivated by price and more likely to be motivated by quality. So we have two different market segments based on some underlying need that they have. And then from this, we can identify who would make up the segment B and who would make up the segment A, and we can describe them and again create a customer profile and so forth. So we have customer A here. They appear to live in maybe a suburban neighborhood. Their house may be smaller compared to segment B. Segment B, it looks like they live more in a rural neighborhood with lots of trees and a large yard. and so forth, they have different characteristics that would be identified here in the market identity or segment identity and customer profile, and they would probably lend themselves to different characteristics as to being quality oriented or price oriented. If you have a much larger home, you may have to buy more siding. Maybe you'd be focused on price. If you live in a very fancy neighborhood, the neighbors are going to look at your siding, and so quality may be more of a focus for you. But either way, we can take this need-based approach and we can identify what the customers are like based on that need. A final example of a need-based approach would be with computers. With computers and doing a cost-based or price-based analysis, where individual components of the computer or features of the computer come with them costs. So if you want a faster computer, for instance, you got to expect to pay more. Or if you want one that has more features on it, you're going to pay more for it. The question is, are you willing to pay more for it, and what type of market segment does that put you in if you're willing to do that? So price and cost may be a need or an underlying factor that we could use as well in terms of where we're going. In a business environment, we could have a similar type of approach. If we have an underlying need, in this example here, we have growth-focused firms and we have cost-focused firms. So these are kind of like, if we have a market or a business objective of growth, that is what our need is, and that defines us in a certain way. If we have a business objective of cost, then that defines us in a different way. So we have the need, and then we have ways to invest and grow, and then we have the demographics that focus on that particular type of need-based company. On this side, we have ways to continue and save. So that's a different objective that the company has, and it would have a different distinct group of characteristics that would be associated with that type of company. So again, we're going from a need to a segment profile, and that's how we're sort of deciding here or identifying a way to regroup our generic market into multiple segments. The last thing that is on this page that should be pointed out is the value proposition. So once we identify the type of consumers that we have available to us, the different market segments that are available to us, one of our goals will be to create a positioned product that satisfies their needs that we've identified. So it could be a tagline, it could be a paragraph describing the product and its positioning and so forth. But what we have is solutions that help you grow your business. That's the value proposition that we've identified for this growth-oriented entrepreneur and our product that we're going to offer them. For the cost-focused entrepreneur or small business owner, we have solutions that save your business money. That's the value proposition, and again, it should relate back to the need that the customer has, and it would be used as a tagline or a focal point to position the product towards that particular market segment. Okay, so that's that. Moving forward, step number 3. So that was step number 1 and step number 2. Step number 3, we want to talk about how we analyze and think about the attractiveness of our market segments. So the first step is the segmenting process and really focusing on what the customers need within each market segment that we've identified and how we can think about them in that way. The next is when we take each market segment, we want to think about how valuable each market segment would be to us. So it might be that we have 5 or 6 different market segments, but only one or two of them may be really ones we want to approach and go after aggressively. Question is, which one or two or three are there that we want, and are there a couple market segments that are just not attractive to us, and how exactly would we know that? So we look at a number of different features that we measure through market research of each segment. The market demand, the competitive intensity, and market access. To formally look at these different features, there are different categories that could help streamline this a little bit more. We can look at the size specifically of each market segment and compare each market segment on the number of potential buyers that are there. We can look specifically at the profitability, so we can imagine how much we would charge each market segment from a price perspective, and how much each market segment would cost us in order to do business with them to get a profitability measure. We want to forecast growth and try to understand whether the market segments are growing or shrinking. We also want to get a feel for the fit, and whether the customers are good with us, maybe habits here, culture, personality of the market, how easy it is to be able to sell to them, and so forth. Competition's a big deal, so we want to be able to get an understanding of how much competitive pressure we would have if we entered that market segment, or how many competitors are there now. Tied into that, we have an estimated market share idea. We want to know whether we will be able to gain share, hold on to share, steal share away from competitors. Strategic fit again, whether they match our resources, match their needs, and so forth. And then finally, stage and scope of the product market. One of the things to think about when we enter a market segment is to know whether the market segment is a mature segment, or whether it's a new segment, whether it's one that is, so a new segment is often growing very rapidly. A mature segment is one that is very predictable, but not a lot of growth opportunity is there. There's probably a lot of the market's probably already penetrated. So you're going to be looking to steal customers away from existing competitors, as opposed to creating new customers in the marketplace, and so forth. Okay, so here are the 8 different ideas then, or criteria we can measure, and we can actually create a chart, and we can compare each of our market segments by each of these 8 characteristics, and this helps us identify which are the most attractive and which ones are not. Getting back to the profitability notion, here's an example of a B2B company that it's called Silicone Sealants. And basically they have 3 different market segments that they've looked at. One would be industrial distributors, one would be an electronics market type of a market for their product. The last one would be the construction market. And for the industrial distributors in the construction market, there's an intermediary that they work through. With the electronic market, they work directly with their end B2B consumer, and so there's they're more profitable in that particular market. They can charge more money, and there's less cost associated with it. So for each market segment, just like you've seen in the past, you can create a financial statement that has the marketing sales expenses in it, the MSEs. We can have estimated revenues and percent margins. So as a result, then we can calculate our net marketing contribution for each of the different market segments. Then we can calculate our return on sales and our return on marketing investments as well, and we can compare the profitability of each of the different market segments. So in this case, the electronics market is clearly the most attractive market segment from a profitability standpoint, if that's what you're focused on. It might be that from a managerial decision standpoint, you have to weigh profitability and volume. And if that's the case, then you certainly can't ignore the construction market because they create a lot of volume for you, as do the industrial markets. Between the industrial markets and the construction markets, we have in measured units, we have 85 measured units. So those are probably, I guess the units may be in millions. It's difficult to tell from this, but thousands or millions. They produce, more than 85%, 90% of the volume of sales the company experiences. So from that perspective, if you're driven by volume, then even though the electronics markets might be most profitable, that might not be the key driving point for you to choose. Okay, so after the analysis or during the analysis of attractiveness, part of that process is to create a financial statement that outlines the profitability of these different segments. Moving forward. So the fifth step is to create a segmentation or a positioning statement based on each segment. So here's a product, Kevlar. Kevlar can be used in many different applications. I think most people think of Kevlar as being the ingredient of bulletproof vests, but it is lightweight. And so it lends itself to many applications. Here are just two, one of which is for a boat and the boat hull that can be created or built using Kevlar. Another application would be in aviation. So here are two different applications for the product, and if you're going to launch this product and going to try to reach the boat repair, construction industry and the aviation industry, you're going to try to reach them using two different approaches. So positioning a product is all about trying to create a place in the mind of the consumer that makes sense for them relative to your brand. So what is positioning? It's the act of placing yourself in front of or towards a specific market segment and setting yourself apart from others in the minds of the consumer. So we want to be able to, once we choose attractive market segments, then we have to be able to take our product and make sure that we make it distinctly for the segments that we have specifically chosen. So we want to, in part here, have a strategy where we design our marketing program around each market segment that we choose to try to reach. So positioning then is a central part of what we do from a strategic standpoint. We have to understand the value proposition of the target segment, or in other words, we have to very clearly understand what their need is. What is the need that we're trying to fill for that specific market segment? And then that's where we answer that by creating the positioning statement. We use the statement then to differentiate ourselves from our competition. We need to be able to distinguish why we are different and why we're unique, specifically for this market segment that we're trying to reach. And also, we want to be able to express to that market segment that we are being unique for them, that we're creating something just for them. Finally, as we begin the positioning process here of actually creating a positioning statement, then what this will do will guide and bring everybody on the same page. It'll guide everybody as we move forward and launch the product in a specific market segment. So it's like a tool, an internal tool that helps keep everybody on the same page as much as anything, as well as reflect what the customer needs and wants. So a positioning statement will actually have 4 different pieces to it. Some of them are not very long. They could be a sentence or two. Some of them could be longer. You could write a little bit more and develop a positioning statement in more detail. Some will be shorter, though, that reflect like a tagline or something along those lines. But generally speaking, the 4 elements that you want to have, you want to be able to identify the market segment that you're trying to reach. So it would be a good idea, if you're writing a positioning statement, to describe the customer that you're trying to reach and specifically describe the market segment. You want to describe your product, mention what the product is that they're buying. You want to be able to identify specifically how your product meets their needs, and you want to be able to describe your competitors or the way their need is currently being satisfied now. Okay, so there's 4 points then, is to identify your competitors, identify your strengths, identify what they should buy from you, and identify the market segment that you're trying to reach with this positioning statement. Now, this would be a complete positioning concept statement. This would have everything in it that you would need to be able to move forward and develop a market scenario or a marketing campaign for the product. Which leads us to this to one of the last steps here. Step number 7, not 6, but step number 7 is the implementation of your business plan or marketing plan, which would include the launch and all of those things, the advertising campaign, the pricing campaign, the distribution strategy, and all of that. Step number 6, though, is really a market research step. What we do in step number 6 is called the segment acid test. And basically what's happening is I'm going to create a it's like an advertisement almost. It's basically a snapshot of my product, and it would include my who I'm trying to reach, the key benefits, what the product is, and the tagline that's included on each one of these is the positioning statement. Now, this positioning concept statement is slimmed down just to really focus on the need that's being met. But this is just a snapshot of the product that's being offered. So product A is a product that would help a person beat inflation and high taxes. Number B, letter B, program B, special help for women with unique money problems. And letter C, safe investment solutions that pay good income. Now, this reverts back to the example we had earlier of the financial investment products that were geared towards women at various stages of their income and work life and so forth, and specifically their investment needs. And what they would want to do, probably building wealth towards retirement and so forth. So what would happen is we would take this snapshot for program A and we would put it in front of a focus group, a group of consumers that would meet that group, that segment's criteria, so the demographic criteria and so forth for that particular market segment. And we would do some research and we would gain feedback as to whether this program seemed like it was appropriate for them and get their feedback from that. So the acid test concept is really a positioning statement and a product positioning test research, form of market research that can be done. Again, focus groups, interviews, interactive, qualitative research like that would probably be beneficial. You could do some survey work with it, for sure. You can always do survey work most of the time, but a qualitative approach would give you probably richer data and a little bit more insight in terms of what the customer would want to see here. So again, so this is the analysis process for looking at our different market segments and then identifying the market segments that are most profitable for us, the ones that make the most sense, analyzing each market segment, and then putting together a positioning statement that would help, again, position clearly the product's benefits as to the needs of the market segments. And specifically, we're looking at a needs-based approach to be able to do our segmentation process and move forward into the positioning of our products. Okay, so that will wrap up this segment as we talk about positioning and market segment analysis.